If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
And welcome back. It's a lovely Tuesday on the Gold Coast where we celebrate big bottoms with Botox and extra larger lips that are bigger than those bottoms with Botox. And there is a bit of intelligence here too. And a very good morning to those in the UK at the moment, bright and early, and welcome to the Country Telegraph. Now, I just want to read this out. This is disturbing before we get into our guest. The Labor government is planning, this is the government's planning and infrastructure bill. It's a land grab. I'll read this out. This includes compulsory purchase by public bodies and governments, local and national, to buy land, which includes the green belt, farmland, and also allotments at low agricultural value rather than the full hope value. After purchase, they can sell land to a housing developer or solar panel company at full development value. The bill also gives compulsory purchase rights to acquire land for nature, which is what they're doing at the moment. Parts of the UK now, they're encouraging farmers to go back to nature. And now it's not a level playing field for farmers and food growers. They will be forced to sell at low value, but the purchaser, often a local council, can sell it at full value. It's basically stealing, isn't it? They can come in and say, we want your land. Bad luck, we're taking it off you, and we're going to take it off you at this very low price, and then we're going to resell it at a very high price to somebody who wants to put in solar panels. What a good idea that is. Who needs agriculture? We need all the energy we can get, which is ironical because the UK doesn't have much sun anyway. Plenty of wind, but it's normally from Parliament. And the UK government is also encouraging farmers to diversify, providing the land hasn't been stolen by that same said government. But what they're going to do is they would like you to, for example, open a stall if you have land. What about a restaurant? What about anything to create an extra income flow and keeps you on the farm longer? Cam, in a sec, can you have this ready for me, please? This is Jeremy Clarkson and some of the troubles he ran into after doing what the UK government said, try to diversify. Local government said stop, and all that red tape. Cam, if you could play diversify.
Yeah, I can't get planning permission. Maybe I should buy an apron and join the Masons. I don't know what you have to do, but I simply can't get planning permission for anything, which is infuriating. But it's not just me, as it turns out. I thought it was, but farmers up and down the country are saying the same thing. It's, as I'm sure you know, Tom, the basic farm payment scheme is being reduced dramatically. Mine's gone down from 80,000 to 60,000, goes down to 40,000 next year, and will eventually go to nothing at all. And the government has told farmers to diversify, to think of other ways of making money and not just to rely on taxpayer assistance. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll open a shop, I'll open a restaurant and sell my produce there. At local government, the local authority just says, no, you can't do that. So they're being told to diversify on the one hand and then told we can't diversify by local planners.
So there you are. It's all gobbledygook from government. You do that and we'll stop you from doing that. And it's the right hand not talking to the left hand, or maybe they are talking to each of the hands. And, well, it's going to make the farmer's life quite almost untenable. My guest is Peter Ridd, by the way, Dr. Peter Ridd. Before we get into Peter to talk about, I mean, it's a shock and awe report yesterday. The only thing they didn't have was, really big music playing, boom, that sort of stuff. 1812 overture, da-doom, that it's the end of the world, according to Chris Bowen. This is one of the reports from yesterday without the big, loud music. Cam, can you play Lies, please?
Soaring numbers of heat-related deaths in the suburbs, rising seas and a blowout to the federal budget. Those are the sobering forecasts from a national climate change risk report that was released today. Live now to Josh Martin with the details from Parliament House. Josh, good afternoon. The government is talking up the positives of action here.
Good afternoon, Tash. Minister Chris Bowen admits every single Australian will be affected by these climate risks, but he says rolling out renewables and mitigation projects will bring economic opportunity. This report is the first ever national climate risk assessment. It was released this morning by the Australian Climate Service in partnership with agencies like the Bureau of Meteorology and the CSIRO. It modelled climate risks based on global warming of 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees and 3 degrees. The worst case scenario of 3 degrees by 2090 would see 10 to 14 extra heatwave days a year, causing heat-related deaths in Western Sydney to soar by 400% and by 300% in Melbourne. Marine heat waves like we've seen in Adelaide, South Australia recently, would last half the year. And the frequency of natural disasters is forecast to increase in Queensland, New South Wales, the ACT and Tasmania. Governments will spend an extra $40 billion a year responding to these extreme weather events by 2050.
There's a cost to pay if the country and the world doesn't proceed to take action. So at a time when the political debate is focused on the costs of action, both real and imagined, this report is a reminder, if we needed one ever, that the cost of inaction will always outweigh the cost of action.
China and the United States have slowed action on emissions reductions. It's causing the Albanese government to focus more on adaptation, spending $12 billion on programs, and it's released a new plan today. It's looking at measures like seawalls and protecting energy and telecommunications assets. Importantly as well, Minister Bowen will release the government's 2035 emissions reduction target this week. Tash?
Josh, thank you.
Thank you. Apparently, it was almost a disaster zone there, because Chris Bowen was so small. Some of the reporters almost stood on him. Terrible person, but maybe that's not such a bad idea. It was a doomsday report. Notice how they showed you the big chimneys pumping out steam. Then they showed you those pumps. What's that supposed to mean? Peter Ridd, Dr. Peter Ridd. A lot of alarmism, isn't it?
It was just purely designed to scare the living daylights out of the population by making completely ludicrous so-called predictions based on models which have utterly no predictive capacity at all. Some of the things that they were predicting, which you didn't mention, were like the number of road closures that there's going to be in 2090 in Western Queensland. I mean, how on earth do they really think they're going to predict things like that? No, as you sort of alluded to, it was a bit like sort of a biblical story where there was plagues of frogs and boils and every bad thing could possibly happen. You got things, I was scanning through it and I saw that Hobart's going to have more heat waves, but they, for some reason, forgot to mention that that Hobart is a very cold place in winter, and that if it's 3 degrees warmer in winter, maybe that's actually a good thing. That the fact that there was not a single good thing in 180 pages, I think it was, something like that, not a single good thing can come out of this. Now, look, it's fair enough if you really want to argue that maybe the extra heat counters the lack of cold, all right? But the fact that they didn't even mention any of these good things that come out, like the fact that the extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is undoubtedly greening Australia. There's no doubt about that. There's good physiological reasons why plants grow better with more carbon dioxide. So the whole thing was really just an exercise in fear so that they can slap on a huge target of carbon dioxide. One wonders whether that is just so that they can get the next COP conference, which is going to be in Adelaide in a few years' time.
And you can't just blame Bowen or the Labor Party. Look at the nincompoops on the other side. I mean, truly, they're joined at the hip. Tell me, how did a lie become the truth? Because it is a lie. And it's, when I went to school, we had a lot of the green teachers. They were actually real greenies. Deodorant soap was not part of the vernacular. I can still recall that. It used to have to stand upwind. But and they would tell us that we're going to freeze and we're going to boil and all sorts of things. But that was done, I'm looking at 50 years ago now. 50 years ago, it was a long time to really cement that lie. Propaganda rules supreme here. I don't understand, though, is our education system, are you an anomaly? Because, I see all these scientists on the gravy train saying the same thing. It's just terrible.
I think it's fair to say that virtually every institution has now been corrupted by a form of groupthink. But you read out some of the names: the Bureau of Meteorology, the CSIRO. Now, 50 years ago, even 30 years ago, these were organisations which you would put on a pedestal as remarkable, brilliant organisations which you can always trust. And by the way, the Bureau of Meteorology still does really good work, in terms of the weather radars and measuring temperatures and all the rest. So they still do some good work. But then there's the climate division. Same with the CSIRO. It still does good work. But then there's the climate division. And they're responsible for this, well, a lot of this complete rubbish. So you then have the situation where the highest scientific organisations in the land are now corrupted by groupthink. They're not allowing any dissenting voices in. Like maybe there's just one or two good things from a little bit of warm weather, if you live in Coomera or something. And then, of course, the education system has always been plagued by a left bias. But now all they're doing is they're just quoting from the CSIRO. You can't blame the teachers if they're saying, well, this is what the CSIRO is telling us. Aren't we supposed to trust the CSIRO? And, of course, the answer is, well, once you could. But clearly there's no way you can now. And, by the way, that's true in my view. Even if you are, I think there's some people worry about climate change, and I disagree with them. But, there's an argument there. But the idea that the CSIRO is now not infected by groupthink and these other organisations, the mere fact they're not mentioning any of the good things from a little bit of warming just proves beyond any doubt that these groups are now untrustworthy.
And I see here coral bleaching in the east and west will occur. Now, I haven't got the music. I need some really Stephen King music here. It will occur more frequently, and recovery will take longer, Peter. Could you?
Well,
up your alley. Tell me, please.
This is a funny thing, isn't it? Because supposedly bleaching has only started recently, and we had devastating bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef in 2016, 2017, 2020, 2022, 2024, and was there one this year? I can't remember. There probably was, right? Devastating bleaching 5 or 6 times in a decade. And guess what happened at the end of the decade? The amount of coral on the Great Barrier Reef rose by a factor of 2. It doubled between 2012 and 2024. It dipped down very, very slightly this year, but we're still the 5th highest amount of coral ever recorded in best part of 40 years of recording on the Great Barrier Reef. So clearly these bleaching events are not having an awful effect if we've got more coral than we've ever had before. And by the way, the crucial thing about it is the species of coral that has really increased in number is the coral most susceptible, supposedly, to hot water bleaching, the Acropora corals. So this is a remarkable thing. Now, just to put that in context, because a lot of people don't understand what the Great Barrier Reef is, a couple of thousand kilometres long. It's about as big as Italy or as big as California. And inside that, a whole bunch of reefs. They're sort of like forests if it was on the land. And in the forest or in the reefs, there are a whole bunch of corals. And so these are the figures of how much of those forests are now covered by trees rather than just dead coral or sand or whatever. So we've got twice as many trees or twice as many corals as we had about a decade and a half ago after all these bleaching events. So bring them on, as far as I'm concerned. It seems that they're not doing too much damage.
I have to say, I can visualise those that don't believe a word that we're talking about. And I should have done it because I should be sympathetic to some of the idiots out there. I should have run around the room with my finger in my ear. I'm not going to listen to that. It's not true. it's dying. The whole thing is just going to and that's what it is, and it's these invisible catastrophes too.
But actually, I think it's good that this is just so over the top that people can smell a rat. So there's a survey done in the UK. This is now over a year old, where they were asked, "Do you think climate change is now being used to control people? That it's become like a religion?" I mean, this thing reads like a religion. It's Sodom and Gomorrah. Everybody's going to be struck down and killed by 2090. So it's exactly like that, and people can smell it. So over 60% of Americans agreed with the statement that climate change has become a religion to be used to control people. And why do they think that? It's not because they're experts on the climate change or radiative transfer and the effect of carbon dioxide. They can smell a rat, right? So the more these so-called scientists give these ridiculous things where there's nothing good, and we've heard this all before, the more people go, oh yeah, maybe not. So I encourage them, do your worst, do your most stupid predictions of, as I said before, how many roads are going to close in Mount Isa in 2080, because people are just turning off.
And what about the renewables, the risk of renewables? We hear about the environmental impacts of windmills, some call them wind farms or turbines, but what about the large-scale solar projects? And before you answer that one, could you years ago, somebody said, look, you're trying to keep, we want to make sure the earth doesn't boil, that we live in a oven, but you got these reflective mirrors, basically, that collects, convert the sun's rays to energy. So tell me, this person, and it was years ago, and I've never forgotten, he said, but what happens to the heat that bounces off these mirrors, these solar panels? So you're an intelligent bloke. I need to know, because every time I talk to someone, I forget to ask them that. So can you just tell me, if we're trying to cool the planet, does the heat bounce off these solar panels back into the atmosphere? And if it does, could you just tell me, before we get into the real question, what happens to that heat? Does it warm the planet, or does it just go out to outer space?
Well, it probably doesn't make a big difference either way, except if you do the silly thing, which we do, of building solar panels over farmland where once it was green, right? So when the sunlight goes onto green grass, there's so much evaporation that essentially you're not warming the planet at all. But yeah, I don't think that what you're alluding to there is the biggest problem with the solar panels. The biggest problem is the pollution in making them. There are fears that it does actually, that leaching of whatever's in those solar panels over many years can affect the soil itself. I'm not sure how big a danger that is. But really, look, the biggest problem with solar panels is that you're often, especially in England, I mean, goodness gracious, why would you put a solar panel in England? It's the most ridiculous idea. But even here, I'm just about to go out to visit a solar farm in a few days' time near Gympie, on an area which is really good farmland. Why would you industrialise an area like that by putting these panels on, when you can build a perfectly good coal-fired power station, or a perfectly good nuclear power station that's small, it's compact, and really it doesn't make anything like the environmental damage that a lot of these solar farms do.
Solar panels are considered hazardous e-waste. What do we do with them? I mean, if they're going to put in thousands, hundreds of thousands of solar panels, they have a limited life. Where do they go?
Well, they go into landfill, like everything else. Is this the biggest problem with solar? No, but it's just yet another problem that, that they cost a lot to make, in terms of energy, in terms of pollution. Then you have to dispose them. They don't work particularly well. They're great for certain things. If you're in the middle of the scrub and you're off grid and you can't get power any other way, they're a wonderful thing. But it's not. They've always been sold as being environmentally has zero cost, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, a nuclear power station has a far lower footprint environmentally. So even if what you're saying isn't a big issue, which I suspect is not a huge issue, it's certainly an issue. And if you add it to all the others and the fact that they don't make power 24/7, why are we doing this?
That's right. I mean, we'd have to ask Chris Bowen, but if he keeps going to these press conferences because he's such a tall guy, he'll get stomped on, I'm sure. If I was there, I'd probably no. I can't advocate violence, even stomping on a minister. But he is a real dimwit, and to think that he's at the forefront of Australia's future when it comes to energy and environment and stuff, it's truly a disgrace. As we have to leave because we've got a bevy of guests coming on. What's your thoughts on the entire this report? Was it justice? And you saw all the legacy media doing their bit. Was it just to scare people, or are they really serious about adopting these measures?
Well, they're dead serious about adopting the measures, and the scare campaign is part of the method which they're going to use it. But I don't think it's working. I think that if you look at opinion polls around the world, more and more people are turning off. If you poll them and ask how much you're actually prepared to pay for all this net zero stuff, the answer is $2 a week, right? The average person is only prepared to pay $2 a week to go net zero. They don't already realise that they're probably paying, 50 or 100 times more than that, probably 500 times more than that. So once they find out, and this is, of course, where we've got to get our politicians to actually start fighting this battle, once they find out they're already paying, say, 500 times more than that, and by the time Albo's finished, it could be thousands of times more than that, they will turn away from it. And this is going to end in tears, but we're going to win.
I think so. I think this is just pure insanity. But if you look at Bowen, truly he's been a blight on Australia for a long time. And if you look at Albo, I mean, what a magnificent piece of machinery he's not. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, Pete. If somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
I have a channel called Reef Rebels on YouTube, which we put up a few things every couple of weeks or so.
Is that to get the hate mail back from some of the learned sites?
Yeah, occasionally. They're usually fairly well behaved.
Yeah, get a few drinks in them. I dare you to say that then. They have a few whiskies or a couple of beers, cheap wines. They become very loud. Look, it's always a pleasure. Peter Reid, thank you very much for your time. We'll do this again, but this is just pure scaring. It's trying to scare the common folk. And it's not just here, it's also the UK. Starmer is doing exactly the same thing. And look at the New Zealand government. If you could call it a government, they're running around. I mean, the cows have got more brains than them. Anyway, this is The World Today. And of course, it's a wonderful news show called The Country Telegraph.
No matter who you are, you'll find a place to belong here.
Join Lions and help shape a community we're proud to call home.
How do I check my skin? What am I looking for? And what do I do if I see a spot on my skin that I'm worried about? It's really important to check your skin and be aware of what's on your skin. You're the best judge, so you know what's on it and what's new or changing or different. We tell people to check their skin at the change of every season, so about 4 times a year, and make sure you do it systematically. So start at the places you can see and maybe ask a friend or someone at home to check your back, places you can't see. You're looking for things that stand out, that are different to their neighbours, that are growing or changing with time. And sometimes skin cancers will be tender or they'll be bleeding, but not always. So if there's something strange on your skin, make sure you go to your doctor and get it checked.
And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. We're continuing our discussion from yesterday with Jordan Dittloff. But before we do that, we played a clip yesterday, so we've pulled another one out of our rubbish bin because truly you'll see what I mean. Great report. Terrible government here. So Cam, if you could play Victoria's treaty before we get into Jordan.
Victorian students from prep to year 10 will be taught Aboriginal truth-telling under a landmark new treaty agreement. The shake-up has been slammed by the opposition, which claims it's another version of the voice to Parliament by stealth.
After generations of Indigenous advocacy, a historic moment in Parliament.
I commend the bill to the House. We are at a turning point in this nation's history.
Top of the agenda of Australia's first treaty as it makes its way through Parliament, a school curriculum shake-up. Students from prep to year 10 to be given an insight into Victoria's First Peoples, taught about the harm of colonisation and injustice.
It's a real watershed moment. If we don't know our own backyard, there's no way that we can make sure that our future is the best one possible.
If rubber-stamped, a new Indigenous council will replace the First Peoples Assembly, armed with greater powers to advise government on Indigenous policy. The cost to taxpayers to bankroll the permanent body, $70 million a year.
Governments are spending significant amounts of money, huge amounts of money, seeking to close the gap, but it's not working.
Before the legislation was even tabled, the Coalition flagged its intention to shut it down, comparing the treaty to the Voice referendum, where majority of Victorians voted no.
The government are trying to put through a voice to Parliament without taking it to the Victorian community.
Despite the declaration, the Coalition is powerless to stop it, with clear support in the upper house.
It is something to celebrate and something that all Victorians can be proud to be a part of.
Jordan Dittloff is a libertarian advocate for capitalism and civil liberties, free speech, free humans and free money. I love that bit. Jordan, thanks for joining us again. Hopefully you won't.
Thank you. It was actually great seeing Peter on just before talking about net zero. And what prevented me from continuing to speak to you yesterday was a sudden power outage, which I'm sure we can come to expect much more of in Victoria. So I was panicked messaging your producer saying, "Oh, the power's out in Victoria." That's probably
you wouldn't read about it, though, would you? You wouldn't read about it. I'm just thinking. This again, I'm looking at this report from Channel 7, and we played a Channel 7 report before, talking about the new scare tactics and this terrible. I didn't
know we had $70 million to spend. The last I checked, I thought we were $155 billion in debt in Victoria. But I suppose what's another $70 million?
Now you worry too much, mate. Just don't worry.
Just lay back and think of England. Just let it happen.
That's right. But that's what they're doing. They don't care. I mean, if you look at France at the moment is, and parts of Europe and the UK to follow fairly shortly. We spent too much. How are we going to stop it? Don't spend. Oh no, we can't.
Print some more money, I suppose. That's probably the expectation. But no, look, it certainly is. Beyond absurd in terms of priorities, but also I think it's quite dystopian and Orwellian to be talking about truth-telling in schools, that we're going to be having, we've already got a respectful relationships curriculum from daycare upwards, which is teaching kids about everything except parents and family and other similar values, and all about, things that really kids shouldn't be worrying about. And on top of that, added to the anxiety of trans issues, net zero, we're going to add truth-telling and cultural shaming to that curriculum. So it's a healthy brew, and we wonder why kids' mental health is steadily declining.
Isn't it interesting that government talks about truth-telling and then they bang it on about this misinformation that people on the internet, for example, are reading and hearing and seeing. And really, it's the state government or the government, whether it's federal or state or even local for that matter, they're the ones that are creating this dialogue of misinformation.
Well, Mike, it's rules for thee, but not for me. And what the government also likes to talk a lot about in Victoria is consent, except, of course, when it comes to, as Opposition Leader Brad Batten rightly said, the consent of the Victorian people. The Voice referendum couldn't have been clearer. And many people were shocked that even Victoria, which is considered to be obviously a socialist hellscape by the majority of the country, quite convincingly voted no at the referendum. And yet that very clear message was completely ignored. And in fact, I think it actually spurred the Allen government on to even more urgent negotiations for a state treaty. It's almost like they want to lock in something ahead of the election next year, that an opposition going to the election would be very hard pressed to say they were going to repeal. And I think that that's the kind of cynical politics we've come to expect in Victoria. But, this statewide treaty bill does much more than simply embed propaganda in our schools. It's also creating an Indigenous infrastructure fund, which I think is, again, very concerning. And I can see that becoming a source of significant rorting and misuse of public funds. We've recently had a series of court cases, some of which are still ongoing, where Aboriginal elders or people involved in traditional owners corporations have been found to have engaged in misconduct. And I think that just as a right-thinking citizen, as someone who has legal training and a keen interest in administrative law, that old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and lack of transparency and accountability does much the same thing. And I think you've got a witch's brew of access to a seemingly endless stream of funds, significant powers and oversight within those areas, and a seemingly unlimited remit when it comes to anything that might be relating to Indigenous peoples. And, the bill makes a big deal, and Jacinta Allen's made a big deal about saying, the powers of the Galangwal, the new not voice, I suppose you could call it, but the new body, they're saying these powers won't be coercive, but then there's a requirement for the Parliament to consult. And what you and I both know, and I think all of your listeners and viewers would readily imagine, is that it doesn't need to be legally coercive or binding for there to be an incredibly strong moral and sort of soft pressure on governments to pay very close attention, indeed, if not actually comply or follow what a Indigenous Parliament type body would request. You can't really imagine in the political climate in Victoria any politician having the courage to sort of stare down requests or demands by the Galangwal body. So I think that's quite concerning. And I think also very concerning that I was midway through explaining yesterday is that this body, as the People's Assembly that it replaces, has a combination of directly elected seats, which is democratic and so forth, although they also get to determine the way those elections are carried out, the rules that apply, who can vote in them. So you've got this kind of almost super elite of Indigenous lawmakers essentially determining who can vote and participate now. But then you've also got these reserved seats, which look for all the world similar to the UK House of Lords, where you've got this kind of hereditary peerage or place-based entitlement to this body. And it's, I think, very undemocratic and very backwards when it comes to that you could have these reserved seats that go to these Aboriginal land corporations or traditional owners groups.
I think you're dead right too. It also it's going to make it very hard for those in the land. Farmers are going to find this extremely difficult. Councils, how do they get around it? Because you see in Queensland, Redlands Council is having a terrible time at the moment. Federal governments, I think, has financed the Indigenous people, or the group there, 7.4 or 7.2 million, and the Redlands Council has got to find the money themselves, which is also, at the end of the day, the ratepayers have got to pay for it. And here's to say that, they will probably lose. Tell me this: when we're talking about farming, and we're talking about all sorts of things, talking about land, but the actual landscape for, say, someone on the land, you got the renewables, you got this climate crap that came out yesterday, you've got the treaties. It's going to make farming extremely difficult, isn't it?
Well, exactly. You've got this kind of, again, this almost, you couldn't dream up a more adverse landscape for farming and landowners in the country if you tried. And my parents are on 20 acres. They've got a little hobby farm. So I grew up surrounded by big farms south of Ballarat in Victoria. Mm-hmm. And, you've got the deck stacked against you as it is. If you're still in farming, you've hung out there tough. And a lot of times, Your kids aren't necessarily going to take over the farm. You've got succession planning issues. You've got a lot of things to contend with already. And then you've got red tape, green tape, and now black tape, potentially overlaying and impacting your ability to develop and use land, your ability to essentially try to struggle against all the odds. And while this statewide treaty bill doesn't impact existing property rights or native title directly, you can see it's absolutely going to provide an impetus for a lot of other changes in keeping with the spirit of that idea. And I think in Victoria, the problem you're more likely to have than councils fighting against it is probably councils going above and beyond what's required under legislation, strictly speaking. I can see a world where councils in Victoria who seem eager to make every issue a local issue, from Palestine to climate change and many other issues that I think are vastly outside the remit of local government. You've got this kind of almost delight in trying to seek out new things to be responsible for.
Jacinta Allen, she's from the bush. I'm really surprised that that she has this attitude, although she hasn't got much of a say, really. It's what they say.
Well, she might be from Bendigo, but she's never worked for anything other than the government in her entire life. She's somebody who, and to be honest, the modern Liberal Party are often not that much better. You've got a political class now who really don't have any sense of what it means to be someone who's responsible for wages, for taxes, for all these things. You've got people and livelihoods, your own families, of course, but also employees and things depending on you. And I think that we're just paying the wages now of a political class who have never been more detached or removed from the struggles of the everyday person.
Okay, what happens, for example, in Victoria, what happens now? What's the next step from the government? Do they they'll obviously move forward with this? When will this all be, signed off, cross the T's, dot the I's?
Well, that's a very good question, because what this bill also makes explicit in its wording is that treaty is an ongoing process. So actually, the real answer to your question is never, by design. The treaty process is ongoing. The handover and creation of new powers and rights is explicitly ongoing. It's in the bill. It's in the explanatory memorandum. This is a process that I think this represents the speed hump, the biggest sort of hurdle. And then once this framework is in place, you'll have a steady but ongoing transfer of powers that I think will be much less heralded, and that the average person will be much less aware of and able to actually object to. The Liberals are in a position where they, and I say this carefully, sometimes the Liberals' willingness to oppose things depends a lot on whether or not they could actually make a difference to it anyway. So in this instance, they've got nothing to lose by saying they're against it, because there's nothing they can do. So they can vote no without consequence. But if they did have the numbers, I think we would be seeing a very different discussion and a very interesting attempt to, contort themselves into all sorts of pretzel shapes, because I'm not certain that the modern Liberal Party would object to it if they were in a position to actually impact the outcome. But I think that the real answer is we need to make sure that we're supporting parties and candidates who will continue to oppose these things, will continue to fight for repeal, who are going to represent local people as well. I think that's really important. And I think that there'll also be a lot of responsibility fall on the legal profession and on advocacy groups who will seek to hold these Aboriginal landowners, corporations, and this Gallenwell body to account. Because I think that's the real, you don't want Dracula in charge of the blood bank without anybody being able to see what's going on. All we have to do is look at the E-Safety Commission or the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, all these sorts of bodies. The worst work gets done in darkness. And I think that there will be a real responsibility on those who are able to do so to try to, I suppose, monitor and audit these bodies externally, because I have no confidence that that'll happen from within the system.
Yeah, we need to keep this conversation going next time, because there's so many other things to talk about. And it's just, if you are a farmer or you're a grower, you're going to find some of this is just going to obliterate. Jordan, if somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
So on all social media channels, my handle is at Dittloff 4 cents, the number 4. Or you can find me on my website, which is www.jordandittloff.com.au.
Jordan, glad you were powered and blackout this time. And great chatting with you too. Jordan Dittloff, libertarian advocate for capitalism and civil liberties, free speech, free humans, free money. And he knows exactly where this treaty is going to take Victoria. And we will continue this discussion very soon. This is The World Today and, of course, the Country Telegraph.
RABI work with thousands of farming people every year, with financial, practical and emotional support. We believe that it's important to empower farming people to move forward positively, whatever they're facing. And it's that friendly, supportive and knowledgeable approach that people like Dan, a young farmer from Staffordshire, really appreciate. After having an accident that left him quadriplegic, Dan reached out to RABI for help to convert an annex to enable him to live independently on his farm.
So they made it really easy for us, because at first we were thinking it's going to be financially very difficult for us to fund it. And Caroline came out to me, and it was really on a personal level, and she could see how much it would benefit me, and she made us feel really at ease. You almost feel guilty asking for help sometimes, but it felt like really a friendly face coming to help, and just so kind to me and very nice and upbeat and positive.
As well as being here to help in times of need, we also work proactively with farming people to prevent problems arising in the first place.
We want to be working and supporting farming people so that they never reach a point of crisis. We want to have potentially a lifelong relationship with a farming person that maintains them being in a place where they are happy and healthy and resilient.
Having RABI on your side means always having access to professional help and support. At the heart of farming, there's always help, there's always hope, and there's always RABI.
And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. Mike Ryan is driving the boat at the moment. And Catherine Blaiklock is was founder of the Brexit Party. Before I get into Catherine, I just want to read this out. People are asking now why UK RSPCA do not do anything about the barbaric treatment of animals in slaughterhouses. And that's what we're going to be talking about. The halal slaughter. Catherine, thanks for joining us. Why does the RSPCA support this? And it is an illegal thing to do.
It's not an illegal thing to do. We need to be very careful with terms.
It's legal if you are using it for that religious purpose.
Correct.
But if you are doing it across the board, it is illegal, isn't it?
Correct, and that is the point. The law says that religious slaughter is for Mohammedans, for Muhammad, and for Jewish people, for Jews, by Jewish people, for Jews. So that amounts to about 7% of the population. And my studies, which I've been surveying supermarkets across the country for the last few months, suggests that about 70 to 75% of the meat sold in British supermarkets is religiously slaughtered. So obviously a vast proportion. I surveyed by meat type, I surveyed by supermarket type, from cheap ones to expensive ones. I surveyed online. I surveyed in 3 areas of the country, and I also surveyed by volume. So myself and another volunteer were literally counting packets in supermarkets.
Could you tell us, just briefly, explain the law and the practice? Now, before we do this, we just got to note that in the UK with farming, there used to be a bevy of these small slaughterhouses that were abiding by the law. Now there is no longer these small slaughterhouses, and the farmer, there's another impost on them. They have to drive a long way to have the animals slaughtered in what you would hope is a humane facility. Halal is not humane. The way the animals die is just, it's awful, isn't it?
Well, let's just clarify terms, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You use the word halal. I'm using the word generally religious slaughter. And this is the issue. There is true halal, which is actually quite a small amount. None of those 4,000, 5,000 packets that we found were true halal. This is stunned, conscious, alive slaughter. And what the supermarkets and the slaughterhouses are doing is hiding behind the word stunned. Now, let's talk about what traditional slaughter is. Traditional slaughter is with large animals, a bolt to the head or to the neck, a gunshot wound, or a gun. Effectively, the animal is completely dead. With turkeys, traditionally, they would have broken their necks. It's not very nice, but it's instantaneous. So we're talking about instantaneous death before a knife gets anywhere near them. The point about religious slaughter is that the animal is not only fully conscious, but is recoverable. So what they do, and this is what we understand they do. With chickens, they pretend that they are stunning them, but we don't think they do anything. They literally hang them up by the leg and cut their throat alive. With turkey, I think it's similar. With sheep and cattle, they electric shock them for about 15 seconds. So this animal is now tortured for 15 seconds. If you stopped doing anything at that point, you could just let the animal go into a field and it would be fully alive and fully recovered. It was never unconscious. But you stun the animal. If it's a lamb or a sheep, it can take between 1 and 2.5 minutes to die after you cut its throat. And with cattle, it's even worse. I don't know if you've worked with cattle or horses, but they're very big animals. They can weigh 1,000 pounds plus, maybe even 2,000. And so a 15-second electric shock to a cattle does nothing. And then you cut its neck and then you bleed it to death for 4.5 minutes. And I haven't really answered your questions, but because you started with the RSPCA. The reason the RSPCA doesn't do anything, in my opinion, is because it's politically correct not to do anything. The next reason, which the supermarkets hide behind, is this stun. They say, well, because it's stunned, it's okay. And the point is this, and I did write a tweet yesterday to Waitrose, because what Waitrose, which is one of the big supermarkets, does, and it's the expensive supermarket, it's also selling Dutchy original lamb. And this is what gets people really agitated, because Dutchy original lamb was originally produced by King Charles. That will be now King William. It's organic. It has all these words like higher welfare, kindness, produced on the best pastures, etc. And then we know that this is religiously slaughtered. And this is not the first time. I'm not the first person to have brought this up. There were articles in newspapers in 2010 and earlier. There have been a progression of people who've tried to do something about this. And what you get back from Waitrose or any of the supermarkets is word salad. Like reams of it, pages of it. Oh, well, it had a little prayer and it's fine because it's stunned. Well, it's not fine because it's stunned. It's tortured. And I wrote this tweet to Waitrose yesterday, which is really very simple, and I'm going to write to them again, is a very simple question. Is your lamb religiously slaughtered? Yes or no? Now, if you answer no, then you're not allowed the exemptions, because the issue that these slaughterhouses is that it's cheaper. And there's less vets and less regulation and less interference. And we don't think the local authorities regulate it in the same way as ordinary slaughterhouses. If the answer is yes, then the slaughterhouses are not allowed to sell it to non-Muslims. And it is almost this problem with the exemption is almost all the halal type. It's not Jewish, because the Jews are just not involved in slaughterhouses. They're not breaking the legislation. But let's just clarify one other thing. It's not Muslims doing this. It's everybody doing this. Behind this religious slaughter, inverted commas, less regulation code. For example, one of the very biggest slaughterhouses is a company called Two Sisters. In 1990, this man called Mr. Boparian, who is a Sikh, started up, and he's now worth over £1 billion. He's taken over Bernard Matthews. He's taken over many slaughterhouses that weren't religious slaughterhouses, many local chicken farms and slaughterhouses near me, and they now are religious. So why have we changed it? What's the point of changing it? Well, our belief is, our contention is, that they're changing them because they're cheaper. And you don't make £1 billion out of chickens. Nobody else can make £1 billion out of chickens. So what are you doing? Well, the only way you could be doing that is by cutting costs. And we believe it's money driving this, overridden by a supine, overlapping regulatory structure. So you have 3 types of people regulating it. You have local authorities, you have the Food Standard Agency, and you have DEFRA, which is the farming agency. And like many things in British legislation, if you overlap legislation, nobody knows what anybody's doing, and it's very hard for anybody to complain or get control of what the issue is. So yeah, that's the gist of and it's myself and Robin Tilbrook. I will mention him, and we plan to fund a judicial review to take these to take the local authorities to court and say, why are you not regulating this?
Now you need money. You and I think you have a plan to raise money, and we are going to run out of time in about 50 seconds. So, can you tell us briefly how someone can donate to this cause? And if Robin's involved, also, he's a magnificent person. So, and we should not be cruel. We should not be cruel to animals.
Yeah, if you want to donate, you can go to GoFundMe and you can put Catherine Blaiklock Halal Judicious Review, and it should pop up for you. Or you can go to my Twitter feed, which is Blaiklock lowercase BP large case, and you will see the link at the top of my Twitter. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very it's a terrible thing. When I always block out when I have some meat, because the thought of what happens to that poor animal beforehand is, and I grew up on the land and I still can't handle it. Catherine Blaiklock, thank you very much for your time. We will continue this because this is one of those great causes that we all need to get behind. Absolutely fantastic with you and the merry people helping you, because you need help. You can't do it otherwise. Catherine Blaiklock, thank you very much for your time. This is The World Today and the Country Telegraph.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.